We are taught from childhood that the resurrection was the ultimate happy ending, a victory over the grave that restored a broken man to life. But if you actually sit down and read the eyewitness accounts of the 40 days following that Sunday morning, the story stops being a comfort and starts becoming a high-strung biological anomaly. We're not talking about a ghost or a shimmering spirit. The text is obsessed with the fact that this was a physical, breathing body that you could touch, yet it was operating under a set of physics that should have shredded the fabric of reality. It was a version of human that didn't just survive death, it seemed to have rendered the laws of the universe entirely optional. The first thing that hits you when you look at these accounts is the sheer physical density of a body that supposedly just walked through a stone wall. In the upper room, the doors were locked from the inside out of pure, unadulterated fear, yet Jesus doesn't knock or break the latch. He is simply there, standing in the center of the room. We usually shrug this off as a miracle, but think about the molecular implications of a solid object occupying the same space as air without causing a displacement explosion. It wasn't that he was less solid than the wall, it was as if he was more real than the atoms surrounding him. But here's the problem. If he was just a vision or a projection, why was he so aggressively hungry? The narrative takes a sharp turn into the visceral when Jesus asks for something to eat. This is where it gets uncomfortable. He takes a piece of broiled fish and eats it in front of him, specifically to prove he isn't a phantom. Think about the mechanics of that for a second. You have a body that can teleport through cedar wood and limestone, yet it still possesses a functioning digestive tract that can break down protein and honey. Where did that fish go? If his body was no longer bound by the limits of decay, why did it still require the fuel of a mortal animal? It's a jarring contradiction, a celestial being with new meat that still leaves crumbs on the table. This wasn't just a resuscitation of a corpse, it was the introduction of a new state of matter. Eyewitnesses describe him appearing and disappearing at will, not like a shadow, but like someone stepping through a door that no one else could see. On the road to Emmaus, he walks for miles with two men, his presence so mundane and grounded that they don't even recognize him. He's dusty, he's tired, and he's talking, but the moment he breaks the bread, he vanishes into thin air. He wasn't traveling from point A to point B, he was moving between dimensions as easily as we walk from one room to another. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. If his body was perfected, why did it still carry the massive, jagged trauma of the crucifixion? No, seriously, think about this. In any other resurrection story, the hero comes back healed and pristine, but Jesus returns with open, unhealed holes in his wrists and a cavity in his side deep enough for a man to stick his entire hand into. Thomas is invited to do exactly that. We're looking at a body that functions perfectly. It speaks, it eats, it moves, while technically possessing wounds that would be fatal to any biological organism. It's as if the new meat didn't erase the trauma. It just decided that bleeding out was a law that no longer applied. The wounds were there, but the death was gone. It's a form of body horror turned into a divine trophy. But here's the stranger part, is the glitch in human recognition. Throughout these 40 days, people who knew him intimately for years, his closest friends, the women who saw him every day, consistently fail to recognize him at first glance. Mary Magdalene thinks he's the gardener. The disciples on the shore of Galilee think he's just some guy waiting for a catch. It's only when he speaks or performs a specific action that the veil drops. It makes you wonder if his physical appearance was vibrating at a frequency that the human eye couldn't quite lock on to, or if his new face was something so layered and complex that the brain simply couldn't process it until it was given a key. But here's the problem. If his body was just a temporary state, a 40-day transition before he left the earth, the text insists this is the permanent blueprint for the future of the species. The implications are terrifying when you realize that this body wasn't just a one-off miracle. The New Testament calls him the first fruits, which is a polite agricultural term for a prototype.
If Jesus' resurrected body is the template, then the physics of heaven isn't a cloud-filled void. It's a high-definition, hyperphysical reality, where your body has the density of a star, but the flexibility of a thought. It suggests that our current version of solid is actually the hollow one, and that whatever Jesus was made of after the tomb was the first time real matter actually touched the earth. And this is where it gets uncomfortable. During the Ascension, he doesn't just dissolve into light, he physically rises. He defies gravity with the same ease that he defied the locked door. Eyewitnesses watched the physical weight, roughly 160 pounds of flesh, bone, and broiled fish, accelerate into the atmosphere until he was obscured by the clouds. This wasn't a spiritual metaphor. This was a physical entity leaving the gravitational pull of the planet. Where does a body like that go? Where does new meat reside when it isn't walking through our walls? But then the twist reframes the entire mystery. We always focus on what he could do, but we rarely look at what he stopped doing. After the resurrection, Jesus never sleeps. There's not a single mention of him resting, or closing his eyes, or seeking shelter. He appears at dawn on the beach. He appears at night in the locked room. He walks the roads in the heat of the day. It's as if the new meat had completely bypassed the need for the restorative cycle of the brain. He was a being of pure, inexhaustible kinetic energy. The physics of his body didn't just allow him to move through walls. It allowed him to exist without the death simulation we call sleep. No, seriously, think about that. A human life with no pause button. A physical existence that never tires, never fades, and never needs to shut down. To us, that sounds like a superpower, but to a mortal mind, that kind of relentless consciousness is almost alien. It's a level of being that is so intense, it borders on the unsettling. But here's the problem with the prototype theory. If this body is our future, why does it feel so fundamentally other? Why did the disciples feel a sense of dread even as they were rejoicing? There's a persistent undertone in the Gospels of people being affrighted or terrified when they realize it's him. It wasn't because they thought he was a ghost. It was because they realized he was something much more solid than they were. They were looking at a version of themselves that was upgraded into something that no longer belonged to this dimension. The mystery of the new meat isn't that he came back to life. The mystery is why he came back as a hybrid. He could have come back as a pillar of fire or a voice from the whirlwind, but he chose to come back with a stomach that could digest fish and skin that could feel the wind. He was anchoring the supernatural into the biological. He was proving that the physics of the spirit could be compressed into the cells of a human man. As the 40 days drew to a close, the accounts become more fragmented, more hurried, as if the witnesses were struggling to describe something that was slowly pulling away from the limits of human language. They saw him eat, they felt the scars, they watched him fly. They were left with a physical memory of a man who had turned the universe inside out. And this is the part that leaves you with a lingering sense of unease. If that body still exists somewhere, if the new meat is still out there, sitting on a throne or moving between the stars, what does that mean for the ground we're standing on right now? We treat the laws of physics like they're absolute, like walls are solid and gravity is a chain. But we have a 40-day record of a man who treated those laws like thin paper. We're left staring at the empty space where he once stood, wondering if the next time the wall opens, we will be ready for the weight of what walks through. The mystery isn't where he went, it's how much of that new meat is already hidden in the atoms of our own world, just waiting for the signal to wake up.